The next thing we're going to do in our game is to add the player 1 sprite. Now the player 1 sprite is probably the most complex sprite in our game, but it's not even that complex. Let's get started. To start off with, we go and click on Paint New Sprite. So player 1, costume 1. We're going to rename costume 1 to Start. S-T-A-R-T. Then we're going to convert it to a vector and then zoom in so we can clearly see the background blocks. Next, we select the rectangle tool and we draw a rectangle, or rather a square. Now the square needs to be 4 blocks across by 4 blocks down. If it's not perfectly sized, not to worry, you can always resize it using the resize handles. There we go. Next, we're going to change the color of our square, and we're going to choose this green. So it's the first, second, third green from the bottom. Paint the inside and paint the outline. Next, we choose the select tool and drag the square to the center. So we're going to center it directly over the cross. So that's the first costume. In fact, player 1 has 6 costumes. The second costume is very similar to the first one. So we're simply going to duplicate. So you right click and then click on duplicate. So we're going to duplicate the first costume. And we're going to rename this costume to Up. Now we're going to make a slight change to this costume. And the only change is that we're going to drag it upwards. We're going to drag it upwards until it's at a point where it's sitting on the top of this cross. So it's centered, as you can see from the center dot, it's centered horizontally to the cross, but vertically it's sitting right at the top of the cross. And that's about it. Time to make the next costume. Duplicate. We'll call this one Down. Here again, the sprite is centered to the cross, but it sits just below the cross. So Up will sit above, down below, just a little bit higher. And then we've obviously got a right and a left. So let's make those. Duplicate, rename to right, and then we move this guy to the right of the cross. And then duplicate again, and then rename this guy to left, and we move this guy to the left of the cross. Make sure that vertically he is perfectly centered, just a little more, and horizontally he is just towards the left of the cross, just about touching the cross. One last costume, but this one we're not going to make, we're going to import. Alright, so let's duplicate this one and we'll rename it Crash. Clear it, and then we're going to click on the import button. Now if you can't see the import button, it's simply because it's compressed. So you need to click on the minimize button for the stage, and there you'll see the import button. So click on import and then look for crashed.svg, which is there. Click on open, and there's crash.svg. Now we're going to do two things here. We're going to resize it and center it. Now if you remember, our player 1 square is 4 background squares across and 4 down. So our explosion also needs to be around about that size. If you look at it currently, it's 1, 2, 3, 4 background blocks high, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 background blocks across. Let's make it a little smaller and then recenter it. And that's perfect. So we've got all 6 costumes for our sprite. The next thing we're going to do is to add the scripts to make this sprite move across the screen.